girl, I think they are also with us in the group, but they will start to come actually.
Oh yeah.
So,
All right. So today we're going to have JavaScript 2, which is a bit more advanced JavaScript. Last time you learned basic JavaScript, like working with the data structures in JavaScript, doing a for loop, doing an if statements, doing some basic functions. This time around, and for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at what is called DOM manipulation. It is essentially changing the HTML as the page is going on. You have probably been to pages that does this, like in Facebook, the chat messages just keeps appearing without you having to refresh the entire page. This is something we can do with JavaScript by manipulating the HTML. We're also going to be looking at how we can use JavaScript to manipulate the styling applied to HTML, so we can change the size of a box, make it all sorts of fancy colors, make things play music because we need to be annoying. That's an exercise for the reader. One thing I will learn you is that I have a habit of speaking really, really fast when I get excited. So tell me to slow down because it can end up really fast and it's confusing. So just tell me and I will try to, but that is also an exercise for me. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is how do we find elements on the page. I have done a simple HTML page already for us. It has a title, it loads in our JavaScript, it loads in our CSS. I assume you have seen these as part of the previous modules. And we also have a single div on this page, that's a square, and it has an ID of square. In the CSS, there's a couple of classes we can work with, so we can see that things are actually going on. So the first part of this is, well, how do we find this square on the page we need it so we can manipulate it? To do that, we access the document, which is what shows us the rendered or effective HTML is called the document, or the DOM, which is also known as the document object model, which just means we can work with it like a JavaScript object, even though it's not really.
Sorry, are you recording?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I already turned it on, and it seems to be recording according to the icons down here. So once we have the document, we can go query selector, which says, all right, JavaScript, go out, find something on the page for me. Well, what should it find? We can tell it if we want to. If we want to access something by the class name, we would do dot square, and that would get us due to the class name here. Alternatively, we can do hashtag square, and it'll select by this ID instead. The difference between classes and IDs is that a class describes something that is general for multiple elements, whereas an ID should really be unique. So a class could be like the job of someone, whereas their ID could be their social security number. So the social security number should really be unique, otherwise we have a problem. HTML won't yell at you if you do that, but it can make it really, really difficult to find out why something is not working. It says, select this exact one, and there's multiple in the pages. Well, which one should it find for us?
Can we select multi-classes?
Yes, you can. So say that we have, there is different ways we can do that. Let's see, we have this one called E1, and inside that we also might have another div called E2. So there's different ways we can select here. I can say, all right, find something that has a .square class and where the same element has the E1 class. It's the same one because there's no space here, as you can see. If I do a space, then it says, all right, find an element with the class of square, and inside that square element, find something with a class of E2. It could also be several layers in, like this, if need be.
But when you're trying to access it, are you on VS Code, the other page, where you're trying to select, this one? This is JavaScript.
This is JavaScript, yes.
Okay.
It's inside a, let me just get the project view open. I'm not using VS Code because I know this program and I know all my shortcuts in that. I know nothing in VS Code, so I feel really handicapped. So there is the index.html, there's the main.js, and there's the main.cs. They're all in the same file, in the same folder right now.
What's called this program you use?
It's called WebStorm, but it's a paid program. I get it from work because I like using it. So let's first, let's find the square. So let's just do this. We tell the page find something and assign it to a variable called square. Relatively simple. And then we can do console.log square. So we find it and we log it out. Nothing more, nothing less right now. So let's see if this works. And it doesn't, because this is really the first lesson that trips everyone up. HTML is kind of sensitive to the order in how things are loaded. So you notice I load the script before the HTML in the DOM. This means that what Chrome does is it goes through each line. Okay, doc type HTML, HTML, head, meta, title, script. All right, I'll go fetch that script. I'll run it. And then once I'm done, I go to the CSS, load that, execute it, go to the head, body. So really, the script was executed before all of this was loaded. So that's why we get null, because at this point, it did not exist yet. There are two kind of solutions to this, depending on what kind of school you subscribe to. You can move the JavaScript to the end of the body. That means that the HTML is loaded first. Alternatively, we can do some event listening, but we'll get into that later. That'll actually allow us to still have it in the head, but only start executing our JavaScript once the page is actually done and finished and loaded. So if we do this, this should now work. And you can see up here, if we zoom in a bit. So I have my square there, and that I get an element out here. Chrome is really nice to us. If we write out a DOM element, it'll actually write out the HTML, the active HTML here, and you can even highlight it to see what is what on it, which makes it easy to find on the page once you have a million of these. So now that we have the square loaded, we can start messing around with it. You can see here in the CSS that I have several classes. I have big, small, red, green, which does pretty much what they say on the tin, make something big, small, red, or green. So what if I wanted this, let's just delete these. What if I wanted this square to be red now? Well, one thing I could do is I could just write red here, and it'll be red. But that's not fun, because we're learning JavaScript now. So we can go into the JavaScript, and then we can actually access the square object. That we can then say, all right, well, give me the list of classes on this element, and let me add another one to it. So I want to add red to it. And it's still red now. But it's not, if we check what we actually load, we only load square. We don't load the red part of this class yet. An alternative way of doing this would be, all right, we can do square. Then we have something called the style property, which allows us to set individual styles. For example, we can set the background color equal to red if we want. Then we can see it's still red, and we can actually see out here that, well, the class is still only square, but it now has a background color of red. This is really the basic manipulation of how would we update an element. We can also go in and change the size here if we want, so we can make it small. And it's now small. The next thing we want to do is add new elements to our page. All right, we have a square. Well, so what? Now I wanted a blue div inside of it that's small. Well, how do I do that? So the first thing I need to do is I need to create the div somehow. You do this by doing document.create element, and then you give it what is called the tag name. The tag name is this part. So you can create, if we say had an unordered list, we can also create a UL by just specifying UL in there. So we create a div. Now we have created the div, but we haven't really used it for anything yet. So it's not actually in the HTML. If we just do this, you can see here in the thing that's written out, there's only the, like that. There's only the square here. It doesn't actually contain the other div yet. So how do we do that? Well, it has a nice little method called append child, where we then can add in the div. So then you can see here, the div is now actually inside of the other element. I said I wanted it to be red and small, I think. So we should update it to be that. So classlist.add. We can actually add multiple classes here. So we can do this. And boom. We now have a small red square inside of it, even though the HTML we got back from the server actually only contains the original big blue square.
But maybe now when you write the JavaScript, it overwrites what we have in the CSS and HTML?
Right now we're actually using what's in the CSS. I'm not sure how much you've been taught about the Chrome inspector, but it can do a lot of things. For example, if I select the square, I can see, alright, so there's a class square that applies to it. What styles does it apply? It applies a width, height, and a background color. And I can actually see, well, what HTML file did it come from? So it came from my Hack Your Future class, JavaScript 2, week 1, main.css, and on line 1 specifically. So if we look at this here, well, we can see that it is the red class came from line 18, and the small class came from line 13, which corresponds, well, pretty well with what's here.
Yeah.
So we can actually go in and see where things are coming from. So right now we're just using the CSS that allows us to make a reusable class. For example, my small class, I can apply that to multiple elements if I want, without actually having to specify the width and the height every time. And then once the designer comes in and says, oh, you made an ugly design, let me just fix that for you, they only have to change the CSS and it just updates in all the places where we actually used it.
Okay.
So that's really the benefit of splitting out your CSS from your JavaScript, because I mean we could do this style dot background color equal red div dot style dot height 100 pixels, and let's do it for the width also, and that would have roughly the same effect. But now if I have 50 on these on a page, I need to go in and update my JavaScript 50 times, and who wants to do that? No one. That's who. So let's just go back to that.
It's just like a little bit confused because you named the variable same like a div.
Yeah.
So now I confuse if you're using the div as a tag or you use it as the concept.
Yeah, and that's why we should really have a better name of this. So let's call it inner square. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's 3 n's. Might be a bit overkill for this. So now it's the inner square, but it's still a div element specified up here.
Okay.
So
when you append the child, you append inside the div what you created first.
yes, I append the inner square to the square. So what we're working with here is something called in computer science terms called a tree, and trees in computer science are really weird because they grow downwards, as we say. You start with something in the root, and then for each of that you have one or several children going downwards. Yeah, and then each of those child can have children and such. Yeah. And how that is represented is really, alright, so we have a root up here, that's the HTML, that's the upper node. That has a child called head, and it has a child body. The head has a child meta, a child title, and a child link, whereas the body has a div and a script child. And then inside the div child, we actually add in another div.
So simply, if I want to do the div outside the first div, I just can write like body.
Yeah, there is a shorthand for accessing this body element, but we can try adding it out there.
If we write like instead of square, we should just write body.
Yeah, so we can actually, there's actually one just called document.body that gets us the body element. We could also do, and then just query selector, and then do body. That would also get us the body element. The reason why you can do this is because there's something really, really technical going on in HTML where you can have multiple documents going on at the same time, and that's really confusing for everybody, so don't do that. But you can. You could also technically have a body of a body, but That doesn't make sense either.
No. Yeah, that's true.
So we can do this, and then I hope it should be like that. So then we can see, then it was actually added as a last child of the body rather than inside the square.
So I cannot choose where it should be exactly in the DOM.
Yeah, you can choose exactly where it should be. Right now, append child just puts it, says, well, add it to the end. That's what appending really means on lists. Add it to the end, move on. You can also say, and it's a really, really strange API, but you can say before, insert before. And then you actually need to find the element where it should be inserted before.
Oh,
so
okay.
you can actually say, all right, inside the body, insert the inner square before the square. So if we just move out that, then you can see then it's actually added up here. So this is how you can be really specific about it. And you can do much more advanced selection, and once you get out and doing something, you will go crazy with specific positions of these, and actually you will be moving them around while they're actually active.
Yeah.
So, any other questions?
Not yet. I'm just trying to absorb what is being said now.
Yeah. So I actually think that was get, create, insert. Oh yeah. Another thing we want to do is be able to add in some text on these. Right now they're really fancy and all with all the fancy colors and being squares, but what can the user use this for? They can't read anything, we can't tell them anything. So if I can hit the actual program, we can go inner square, and then there's something called inner text and inner HTML. What inner text does is that it allows us to insert text. And it says hello there now. Alternatively, we can do inner HTML, and if we just do this, it's the same. We insert some text in there. But there's actually a slight difference. If we do some HTML in here, so say I do a div with a class equal square and end div, and I want this to be green and small, and then I say hello there. Again, this will actually be active HTML, whereas if I do this up here, it will not. So that's the slight difference between those two. Once you get later on in the course, we'll talk about why you really shouldn't use this one, the inner HTML, because you can get into some security issues and all sorts of stuff, which I would say like 70% of the hacks that happens on the internet is because someone used the wrong one of these. So when in doubt, use inner text. Even if you're in doubt, you should probably still, even if you're not in doubt, you should probably still use inner text. So, all right. So how about we start with this? There's actually a relatively simple exercise here. So create an array of strings with your favorite dishes. With JS, select a UL element in the DOM, and then add the UL to the, you can add the UL to the HTML file manually. Now loop through the array of favorite dishes and create an LI element. Set the text, and then insert the elements to the UL. I think we should go and spend, how much time do you think you need? 20 minutes, 30 minutes?
Forever.
Next Wednesday?
No, I think Maria will have my head if I do that.
Yeah.
So just try getting started with this, and then we'll look at how far you come, where your problems were, because it's actually really good if you get stuck. That means there's probably something I forgot or that I need to explain again. So let's start with that.